The rain fell steadily through the amber glow of the streetlights as 38-year-old Alexander Chen stepped out of his luxury sedan onto the quiet downtown street. His navy business suit and polished shoes reflected the success of a man who had built a technology empire through years of dedication and strategic thinking. The late-night business meeting had run longer than expected, and Alexander was eager to return home to his 10-year-old son, Marcus, who was waiting with the nanny. As Alexander reached for his car door, preparing to drive to his penthouse apartment, he heard something that made him pause. Through the gentle patter of rain against the pavement, he could hear the unmistakable sound of someone crying. Not the casual distress of everyday troubles, but the deep, heartbroken sobs of genuine despair. Following the sound, Alexander looked across the street and saw a young woman sitting on the wet sidewalk beside a closed storefront. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with blonde hair darkened by the rain, wearing a cream-colored dress that clung to her shivering frame. In her arms, wrapped carefully in what appeared to be a small blanket, was a tiny baby. Alexander's first instinct was to continue on his way. As a successful businessman, he had learned to be cautious about getting involved in situations that might prove complicated or dangerous. But something about the scene before him, a mother protecting her child in the rain, stirred memories of his own struggles as a single parent, and his deep understanding of what it meant to feel helpless when your child needed protection. Alexander approached slowly, not wanting to startle someone who was clearly in a vulnerable state. As he drew closer, he could see that the woman was very young, probably no more than 24 or 25, and that despite her obvious distress, she was holding her baby with the careful attention of someone who would do anything to keep her child safe. "Excuse me," Alexander said gently, stopping a respectful distance away. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman looked up at him with eyes that held both desperation and terror. She clutched her baby more tightly and shrank back against the building wall, clearly frightened by the approach of a stranger. "Please," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Please do not take my baby. I know I do not have anywhere to go right now, but I love her. I'm trying to take care of her." Alexander felt his heart clench as he realized that this young mother believed he might be someone with the authority to separate her from her child. Her first concern, even in her obvious distress, was protecting the relationship that mattered most to her. "I am not here to take your baby," Alexander said softly, crouching down to make himself less intimidating. "My name is Alexander, and I am just someone who was walking to his car and heard you crying. I wanted to make sure you were safe." The woman studied his face carefully, as if trying to determine whether she could trust his words. "My name is Julia," she said quietly. "Julia Bennett. This is my daughter, Emma. She is only 2 months old." Alexander could see that despite Julia's difficult circumstances, the baby appeared well cared for. Emma was clean, properly wrapped against the rain, and clearly loved. Julia's dress, while soaked from the weather, was neat and showed signs of careful maintenance despite her obvious lack of resources. "Julia, how long have you been sitting out here in the rain?" Alexander asked, noting that both mother and baby were beginning to show signs of being dangerously cold. "Since this afternoon," Julia replied. "We had to leave the shelter this morning because they have a 3-day limit, and I have been trying to find somewhere else to go. But most places require identification and proof of income, and I lost my purse yesterday when someone grabbed it while I was waiting for the bus." Alexander felt a familiar ache as he thought about his own son, warm and safe at home, and imagined how desperate he would feel if circumstances had ever forced him to seek shelter on the streets with Marcus. "Julia, you and Emma are going to get sick if you stay out here much longer," Alexander said. "Let me help you find somewhere warm and dry for the night." Julia's expression showed both hope and wariness. "I do not have any money to pay for a hotel room, and I do not want you to think I am asking for charity. I just need a chance to get back on my feet." Alexander stood up and removed his suit jacket, offering it to Julia to help shield her and Emma from the rain. "I am not asking you to pay for anything, and I do not think you are looking for charity. I think you are a mother who is trying to protect her baby, and I want to help because any parent would want someone to help them if they were in your situation." Julia looked at Alexander's expensive car and well-tailored clothes, clearly trying to understand why an obviously wealthy stranger would want to help someone like her. "I have a son myself," Alexander explained, sensing her confusion. "His name is Marcus, and he is 10 years old. If something ever happened to me and he needed help, I would hope that someone would be kind enough to look after him." Something in Alexander's voice when he mentioned his son seemed to convince Julia that his offer was genuine. She allowed him to help her to her feet while she continued to hold Emma protectively. "There is a family hotel about 15 minutes from here," Alexander said as he guided Julia toward his car. "They have suites with kitchenettes, and you and Emma can stay there while you figure out your next steps." As they drove through the rain-soaked streets, Julia told Alexander about the series of circumstances that had led to her current situation. She had been working as a receptionist at a small medical office until her pregnancy made it difficult to continue. When Emma was born with some minor health complications, the medical bills had exhausted her savings. Her landlord had evicted her when she fell behind on rent, and she had been moving between shelters while trying to find stable housing and employment. "I am not asking for a handout," Julia said as they pulled into the hotel parking lot. "I just need a chance to get back to work and provide for Emma properly." Alexander admired Julia's determination to maintain her dignity while accepting help. He saw in her the same fierce, protective love that he felt for Marcus, and the same commitment to doing whatever was necessary to care for her child. Over the following days, Alexander found himself checking on Julia and Emma regularly. He helped Julia replace her lost identification documents, connected her with social services that could provide ongoing support, and used his business connections to arrange job interviews for positions that would accommodate her need to care for her infant daughter. What impressed Alexander most was Julia's resilience and gratitude. Despite facing circumstances that would have overwhelmed many people, she maintained her hope and her commitment to building a better life for Emma. She reminded him of his own struggles after his wife died, when he had been forced to learn that strength comes not from avoiding difficulties, but from facing them with grace and determination. 3 weeks later, Julia had secured a position as an administrative assistant with a company that offered on-site childcare, allowing her to work while keeping Emma nearby. Alexander helped her find a small apartment within walking distance of her new job, and he continued to visit occasionally, watching with satisfaction as Julia rebuilt her independence and confidence. "Alexander," Julia said one evening as he stopped, "by to see how she was settling into her new home, I want you to know that what you did for us that night changed everything, not just because of the immediate help, but because you saw us as people worth helping when we were at our lowest point." Alexander looked at Julia, who was glowing with the confidence of someone who had overcome tremendous obstacles, and at baby Emma, who was thriving in the security of her mother's love and a stable home. "Julia, you and Emma taught me something important about what really matters in life," Alexander replied. "When I saw you protecting your daughter in the rain, I was reminded that the greatest privilege in the world is being able to help someone when they truly need it." 6 months later, Julia had been promoted at her job and was taking evening classes to earn her business degree. She often brought Emma to visit Alexander and Marcus, and the four of them had formed an unlikely but genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it means to be a parent who would do anything to protect their child. Marcus had grown especially fond of baby Emma, taking pride in his role as her honorary big brother and learning from his father's example that helping others was one of life's greatest responsibilities. Alexander often reflected on the rainy evening when he had heard Julia's plea not to take her baby, and how that moment of human connection had enriched his and Marcus's lives immeasurably. He had learned that sometimes the most profound gifts we receive come from the simple act of offering help to someone who needs it, and that the bonds formed through kindness and compassion often become the most meaningful relationships in our lives.